people have told me in training that you can't access your upstairs brain if your downstairs brain is telling you what you have to do to stay alive. So you can't think and logic if you're trying to get to the next safest place or where you can get food or water or whatever to keep your body functioning. Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Book Therapy. I have another great book coming up for you next, but first I just wanted to remind you to check out my Substack. The link is in show notes, and if you have no clue what it is, I totally understand. It's fairly new, and it's just another free website for you to get free content from great writers. My writing will be on there, as well as links to other authors that you should check out because they're smart and funny and amazing. I like being on there because it's not as addictive as social media and there are no ads. So once again, the link is in the show notes. Enjoy. All right, let's get on with the show. Let's dive into the book. Today we are talking about Try Softer by Aundi Kolber, a fresh approach to move us out of anxiety, stress, and survival mode and into a life of connection and joy. Aundi Kolber is a trauma-informed therapist, and she lives in Colorado with her family. This is her first book, but her second book, Strong Like Water, has also been very popular and gotten a lot of really good reviews. I liken Try Softer to KJ Ramsey's work. KJ Ramsey is also a trauma-centered therapist, and they both are just so gracious. So if you have been living the try-hard life like me for years, this is an invitation to try softer. My disclaimer is that obviously I'm not a therapist, and I don't think I would make a very good therapist because my husband has way better listening skills than I do. But I like to think of myself as a kitchen table counselor is what it's been called in the past, where basically our lives revolve around people. And so we are always willing and open to helping people. But this book really was for me. I needed it desperately just to sort through some of the things I've gone through in my life. And also it really helped me figure out what emotions are and what feelings are. And if that sounds like too girly or too woo-woo, I promise you what she teaches in this book is just so practical and so kind. I think one of the things that women especially have a hard time with is being kind to ourselves and our bodies, and also understanding why we're feeling what we're feeling and what to do about it and not to feel shame about it. I cannot go through everything that she talks about in this book. I'm still reading her other book, but I think that that's going to be on the list to have on the podcast too, because she's just so smart. And once again, she's just so gracious. And I think I need kind people in my life pointing me to Christ and informing me about how our bodies work and how we can be kind to ourselves and also to other people as we struggle through this life. We are going to talk about 3 ways that we can try softer. But before I get into this, I want to talk about what she means by try softer. She says the phrase white knuckle a lot. And I think that's a good visual because when you're driving, you know when you're holding the steering wheel too tight, if your knuckles are white, or if you're really angry and you're making a fist, our knuckles are white. And that's just describing how tense we can get and how we can hold on to things so tightly. Our lives are not meant to be held that tightly. I love how Bob Goff says, open your palms, like lift your palms up and open your palms and say like, Lord, I will take whatever you give me today. Sometimes I've done that as just an act of surrender. And I feel like it's the opposite of white-knuckling, which is something I tend to do. You want to be in control. You want to know the plan. And you can be rather forceful with yourself or with others in making things go your way. She says on page 193, trying softer isn't about knowing or doing the right thing. It's about being gentle with ourselves in the face of pain that is keeping us stuck. Because no matter how hard we try, we can't hate or shame ourselves into change. Only love can move us toward true growth. This is the love given to us by a gentle, kind, and compassionate God, and the love we are invited to give ourselves to. In this season of life, I'm leaning into more of the graciousness and kindness and compassion of God. Not that I've ignored that he was those things before, but he's been different to me in the past just because of my perception. And now I really feel like he's closer than ever. And I often pray, Lord, help me feel your love. I want to feel your love. I want to be loved by you. Hold me. Once again, Aundi Kolber goes into so much detail. And as far as like psychology is concerned, she talks a lot about brain function. She talks about attachment styles and self-care. And then towards the end, she talks more about the body and mind connection and emotions and feelings. The two chapters that really stuck out to me were about feelings and emotions, and then about the body. Those were super practical, and we'll get to some of the high points in those chapters. But I still don't understand all of her details about the brain. I've heard of like the upstairs and the downstairs brain, the upstairs brain being more of like your thinking and logic, and then the downstairs brain being more of like what's keeping you alive, your survival, what you need in the moment to get through the next, however many minutes or hours. So people have told me in training that you can't access your upstairs brain if your downstairs brain is telling you what you have to do to stay alive. So you can't think and logic if you're trying to get to the next safest place or where you can get food or water or whatever to keep your body functioning. This translates into care for people who have been through trauma, because you have to have compassion for a person who can't access thinking and logic and behavior strategies when they are scared and when their body is telling them to run away or to fight. You have to help them get through that really scary moment in order to get to the point where they can think logically. There's so much more about the brain that I have to learn. Honestly, every time somebody talks to me about the brain, my brain hurts. And I'm trying hard to understand it, but it's still super complex. And so I'm not going to talk in depth about psychology, even though in the book she does mention it several times and she does reference the brain. I'm just going to leave that to the professionals. The first way we can try softer is by recognizing our limits, our boundaries, and this thing called a window of tolerance. What is a window of tolerance? She says on page 72, each of us has a window of tolerance, whether we find we are constantly pushing against the edges of it or not. When we are in our window, the brain stays integrated with the prefrontal cortex, which allows us to pay compassionate attention to ourselves and to try softer. This is where we want to be. She has a chart on the next page that says, when I'm in hyperarousal, which is fight, flight, or fawn, I may feel overwhelmed, heart racing, physical shaking, the urge to move, angry, out of control, scared, or anxious. When she's in her window of tolerance, she may feel strong, competent, curious, relaxed, content, balanced. When she's in hypoarousal, which is freeze, she may feel sluggish, depressed, suddenly exhausted, foggy or zoned out, paralyzed, numb, or shut down. There's various things that we can go through that make us feel like we want to run away or make us feel completely shut down. One example of this, it happened probably several weeks ago now. I was having trouble having a conversation with someone, and I knew that my heart was telling me, and not only like my emotional heart, my physical heart was telling me that I needed to take a step back, that I couldn't handle a conversation at this exact moment, and my body was kind of panicky. And my husband even gave me a wise suggestion. He said, well, maybe you should take a few minutes of a break. And I said, okay, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes and then I'm going to go back and talk to this person. And he's like, I don't think 5 minutes is long enough. And it wasn't funny, but looking back, it is funny because of course 5 minutes wasn't long enough. But in that moment, I wanted so desperately to just get back to the situation and fix it and have it be over and done and completed and we could move on. I didn't recognize that I needed more time than that and the other person needed more time than that. And when I ignored his wise advice and went back in there and tried to have another conversation, it did not go well. So I learned a valuable lesson that day just to listen to my body, and I was out of my window of tolerance. I had attempted my best and it was not going well. And so my body and my husband were telling me to pause, and I half listened because I did pause, but I didn't pause long enough and I rushed back into something. I love the Boundaries book by Cloud and Townsend, and I love the idea of limits because we are always pushing past our limits. On page 94 and 95, Aundi is highlighting how Jesus showed us how he embraced limits. It says in Mark 1:35-38 that Jesus got up and went to an isolated place to pray. It says in Matthew 19:13-14 that Jesus laid his hands on children and prayed for them when other people told him that he shouldn't be bothering with the children. Jesus gave of himself and then he rested when he needed to. She says on page 96, boundaries are necessary when someone asks us to handle their load. Many clients I work with grew up in families where they were required to take on other people's individual loads but weren't permitted to ask for help with their own legitimate burdens. For example, parents may try to make their children into little adults by sharing mature information, emotions, or situations and expecting the children to handle it for them. Perhaps a mother overshares with her 10-year-old about her marital issues, or a father repeatedly talks to his children about the family's financial woes. These types of interactions are hurtful to children because they don't yet have the emotional resources to process what the adults are asking of them. Unfortunately, a lot of kids are forced to grow up and are forced to do adult-like things when they are not ready for it and they're not mature enough to handle adult-type things. One way we have to be careful of watching our window of tolerance is by setting limits before things get out of hand. There are boundaries that we can set where we can give ourselves the self-care and the attention that it needs before things get too far gone. She talks about on page 130 how she began to realize that after a day of seeing clients, she would come home with intense muscle headaches. She says, this has been happening for years, but I would never really notice the pain until I was packing up and leaving for the day. It wasn't until I trained under a wise trauma therapist that I began to understand that while seeing clients, I had not been tracking with my own experience for hours at a time. I would sit with folks and be deeply attuned to them, but in the process, I would lose myself. Practically, this meant I had been ignoring or remaining unaware of the way I held my neck or my body and bypassing the cues of hunger and thirst that my body had been giving me. It's easy for her as a therapist to kind of fall into the world of her client because she is truly empathetic and right there with them, but she was not taking care of herself in the process. Ignoring hunger and thirst is a big deal, and it does happen often. I think people who are really hard workers get caught up in what they're doing and then forget to eat or, realize, man, I haven't drunk water all day. I like to think of it as the oxygen mask analogy. Lately, when I'm eating, my kids will come up to me and they're like, what are you doing? Or can I have this? And I'm like, no, I'm putting on my oxygen mask. And I'm eating and drinking, sitting down because it's important for me to take care of my body so that I can be fully capable of taking care of them. This is referring to the safety speech on the plane where they say, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help other people. My dad used to say, take care of yourself because nobody else is going to take care of you for you. And he didn't mean that in a selfish way. It's more of, if you need to eat so that you don't pass out in the middle of something important, then go eat. Everybody wants you to be capable. Also, it always comes back to self-care being tricky. What if we can't take a break and go eat? What if we are up all night with a sick kid and we have to still go to work in the morning? There are circumstances where the swinging of the pendulum as far as balance goes will be way on one side and then the next day way on the other side. It's not, balance is not going to be easy to achieve as something that's always in the middle. Some days you are going to be able to eat 3 full meals at a table, warm and freshly prepared, and you will feel so satisfied. And then there might be another day where you're grabbing food on the go, you're hurried, you're chugging water while you're running to the next soccer game. But there is this important idea of checking in with yourself. Hey, I have a headache. Have I been drinking water? Hey, I just fed everybody, and while they're cleaning or doing chores, let me go ahead and sit and eat as well. And if someone comes up to me, as long as it's not an emergency, I can ask them to wait. Hey, I'm eating. I'll be done in 7 minutes, and I'd love to help you then. Advocating for yourself is not terrible. It's really not. It's really going to help you because you're going to not be as resentful, and it's going to help those around you because they're going to see that you're setting healthy limits and they're going to learn to adapt to those. It's hard because you have to let go of your people-pleasing attitude of, wait, I need to help them because if I don't, they won't like me. Well, that's a whole nother issue, but I can't live my life based on what other people think of me. So that's been an important perspective shift for me. Okay, I know this sounds crazy, but we're actually going to stop here and pick it up next time. We talked a little bit about who Aundi Kolber is and what kind of therapist she is and what she focuses on in this book. And next time we will dive more into the body and mind connection and also learn more about riding the wave of emotions. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Book Therapy. Today we talked about Try Softer by Aundi Kolber. This is part 1. We will be diving into part 2 next time. So we'll see you then. We talked a little bit about what trauma therapy is and actually we did not talk about that.